I'd like to just acknowledge not all stress is equal. There's good stress, there's bad stress, and some stress really does help us function more optimally. The problem of stress is also the negative effect that it has on us physically, psychologically, and relationally.
Matt, last week, on one of our previous shows, we talked about you need a vacation.
You need a vacation.
But people need vacations, right?
Yep.
And one of the benefits of taking a vacation that we talked about was de-stressing, decompressing. And you said studies show that you really can't decompress unless you have an 8-day vacation.
That's right. You need a length of time away from home.
I've been stressing all week about trying to figure out how to take an 8-week vacation, an 8-day vacation. No, but the reality is, come on, you even said it, in our culture, to take an 8-day vacation is kind of, I'm not going to say unrealistic, but it's not the norm. So there has to be better ways to deal with our stress, because right now in our world, as we see it, in our city, in our country, in the world, there's a lot of stuff that we're having to deal with that is stressful.
Yeah, there's a lot of stress around us right now. I mean, we're in the middle of pandemic.
A pandemic, right? We're concerned. Maybe we're concerned about getting sick ourselves, or we're concerned about unknowingly getting someone else sick. You know, this is just COVID stress.
Yeah,
but we're also looking at racial stress right now in our country. We see, we have a presidential election coming up. The polarization in politics, and that brings about all kinds of stressors. The fear of what happens if this person wins. What's going to happen to me, to my livelihood? If that person wins, what's going to happen? So that raises a lot of. I got to imagine. Are you seeing a lot of this right now? Is this something that you're having conversations about, maybe with clients or with students? Yeah.
So in addition to, you mentioned health stress or COVID stress, you mentioned the political landscape, you mentioned police violence against minorities and the racial stress, the protesting right now. People are also worried about their employment, jobs. The job market's not great. I mean, I heard yesterday somebody lost their job and is having trouble finding a job. It's July. Unemployment benefits are set to expire at the end of the month.
Yeah.
So people are really worried about finances. School. Lots and lots of families are worried about what's going to happen with school in the fall, and even for the people out there who are doing well, meaning they have their job, they're working from home, things are okay for them. There's the stress of the unknown of how this is going to unfold over the next several months, what the rest of 2020 is going to look like, what the beginning of 2021 is going to look like is stressful. Just unknown presents an additional stressor. So yeah, it's kind of, as we like to say, piling up on people. It's not one stressor.
We even have in the stock market, we even have a volatility index that basically measures the level of stress in the markets, right? The VIX, it's also called the fear index. So when the VIX is high, there tends to be a lot more anxiety, a lot more unknown, a lot more volatility in the markets, which that leads to what comes first, volatility in the market, to stressing about your investments, or stressing about your investments leads to volatility in the market. The point is that we even measure this. We even have a metric to measure this in the stock market.
All kinds of risk out there that people are trying to compute and make decisions about.
I'm going to, be totally transparent here. Podcasting is a stressor. I mean, I'm not an audio guy, and just trying to figure out sometimes to get this microphone work. I mean, you're smiling. They can't see you smiling around, but you're smiling because you can see the stress on my face that I'm hoping that this microphone doesn't stop working middle recording because I've got some crazy power issue going on with this microphone. I can't figure it out.
Yeah, you've been worried about your audio for weeks now, and
my hair's falling out.
It's driving you crazy. So lots of people are stressed about lots of things.
What's crazy is we're even stressed about our stress.
Yeah.
It's so counterintuitive. Is it counterintuitive? We're stressed about our stress. What
do you want to do about it?
Well, I'm hoping that you're the doctor, you're the therapist. I'm hoping that you can give our listeners a therapy session here on stress. But before we do that, why does it matter? Why do we need to address it? This sounds like an obvious question, but I think sometimes the obvious eludes us. But I don't think we stop long enough to think about the obvious sometimes. What are the problems with stress, or what are the problems if we don't deal with our stress?
Mm-hmm. Well, first, I'd like to just acknowledge that not all stress is equal. There's good stress, there's bad stress, and some stress really does help us function more optimally. The problem of stress is also the negative effect that it has on us physically, psychologically, and relationally. So chronic stress does create a problem for the body. The body holds stress, known as the allostatic load. It's the wear and tear of stress on the body. And, prolonged exposure to stress does negatively affect the body. I recently, in May, went to my primary care doctor and had my annual physical and blood work done. And when my blood work came back, he said, your cholesterol is a little higher than normal. And I said, oh no, that's unusual for me. I tend to try to take care of myself. And he said, don't worry, everybody that I talk to's cholesterol is up right now. I said, what? He said, yeah, everybody that I've seen, all my patients, cholesterol's up. And I said, what's going on? He said, it's stress. It's just it's stress on the body right now. So part of the problem is the physical effect of stress on the body. Part of the problem is the psychological effect of stress on our hearts and minds, if you will. Prolonged exposure to chronic stress and even trauma certainly negatively impacts us. We're kind of always primed for fight or flight. We're always on high alert. We're never at rest. We're never at peace. There's been studies about chronic stress in children, adverse childhood exposure to stress scales have demonstrated time and time again that stress does negatively affect us psychologically. It leads to a sense of burnout where people just feel emotionally exhausted. And when people feel bad physically, feel bad emotionally, are exhausted, they're much more likely to damage their relationships by being short and harsh and critical and lashing out at each other. And so stress becomes this cumulative negative effect on our lives. And so it really is a problem. Again, not all stress is bad stress. There is good stress, like you and I both go to the gym and we are stressing our bodies. We're putting our physical body through a harsh workout, and sometimes we're sore afterwards. But we look at that differently because we know that short-term exposure to good stress has a long-term positive effect both on our body and on our well-being. We feel better later. We might just not feel that great during. So good and bad stress.
I think regarding that stress, I think we make a conscious decision that I would rather put my body through this stress and be sore for a week than not be able to move because my back hurts. I think that's the reality of post 40.
So we'll come back to that idea of how we think about stress really affects our experience of the stress.
Yeah. You talked about burnout. You talked about the impact of stress on our physical bodies, the impact of stress on our emotions. You talked about the impact on our relationships because we get, when we're stressed, we become harsh, we become short. But it also impacts our decision making. We're not at our best. We're not as sharp as we normally are when we're experiencing a lot of stress. I know I see that often when, obviously I talk about money with clients on a regular basis, and money oftentimes is a stressor for people. They're stressed out about, they're stressed out about, do I have enough to retire one day? Do I have enough to pay off my debt? So there's a lot of these stressors that they're dealing with their money, and they can't make what sometimes seem like obvious decisions. And I'm not talking about like extreme cases. I think this is all of us. We're all at these. I even have a buddy of mine who's a financial advisor who I'll turn to and help, ask him to help me think through some financial decisions, because I know that I'm clouded sometimes. I'm not making the best decisions sometimes. So I'll lean on him to help get some clarity on certain financial decisions. And I think that's one of the if we don't deal with our stress, if we leave it unmitigated, we start making poor decisions, and poor decisions can lead to poorer decisions.
Yeah.
And poorer decisions lead to bad consequences.
Yeah, for sure. And kind of going back to this idea that not all stressors are the same, or not all stress affects every person the same. There's an old theory in the counseling world known as the ABCX model for family stress. It was developed by a researcher named Reuben Hill, and it's been updated over the years many, many times to be broader and more nuanced. But the old ABCX model said that stress is the A in the equation, and the stressor is something that most of us have very little direct control over. Like our exposure to COVID right now, we have some control over, but not a ton. So the A is something we have very little control over. The end of the equation, the X, is the resulting level of stress that we experience. And you could scale this between 1 and 10, for instance. And so some stressors might lead to a resulting level of stress of 4 in some families, and the same stressor might lead to a 10 in some other families. So what's in between A and X that can affect the resulting level of stress? Well, Reuben Hill's model postulated that B and C, the family's resources that they have to deal with the stress, and their perceptions of the stress really do mitigate the resulting level of stress. So more resourced families are more capable typically to deal with stressors, but also this idea about perception. The meaning the family makes about the stressor, their appraisal of the stressor, their understanding of the stressor, their ability to absorb psychologically the stressor really does affect their ability to deal with it also. And so that, I think that is a helpful framework as we're trying to help people deal with stress. We have very little direct control over A, and we have very little direct control over X. But what we can help people do is add more tools to their arsenal, add more resources to help them deal with stressors.
Let me pause you really quick. Could you maybe dive a little bit deeper on the issue of resources? When you say resources, my mind immediately goes to money or wealth, financial resources. But as you talk, I'm thinking, well, it's probably not just financial resources. It could be like support resources, is that part of the model? Like what level of support do I have by other family members? Emotional resources?
Yeah, well, I would think of it as internal and external resources, things that I have at my disposal already, internal resources, and external resources, things I can go out and get. So for instance, if we're talking about money, you were talking about money being a stressor for some families. Well, one resource that some people have more of than others is skills in managing money, budgeting, knowing how to read a bank statement, knowing how to appraise like how much, what is my interest rate, and is it a good interest rate? So they have more just kind of financial acumen, and that becomes a resource in and of itself. They have more financial skills, and that's a resource. Now, Very wealthy people who have a ton of money might not have those same skills. And so they're at a deficit. But what they can do is they can go out to somebody like yourself and learn those skills. Or they could pay somebody to provide that service for them. Mm-hmm. Those are resources.
So resources include also that experience, the knowledge to be able to manage it.
Yeah. Just being the fact that you've done it before then becomes a resource. The perception, though, another part of the equation, the C, perceptions, is this belief of I can do this. I've done this before. I got through this before. I can handle this. Those kind of psychological perceptions about the stressor are so important for dealing with the stressor, living through the stressor.
So we go to the gym and do these crazy workouts that we know we're going to be sore for a few days because we know that our perception is that this is actually going to make us healthier. This stress is actually good for us. It's going to improve.
Yes.
So
we're walking into the gym kind of with a smile on our face because we think this is good. But other people aren't getting close to the gym. They're in their bed because they think it's bad. I don't want to do that. It's going to hurt. It's not going to feel good. I'm not going to like it.
It does. But sometimes out of pain and out of suffering, good things come out of it, right?
That's right.
Which, interestingly enough, makes me think of this idea of the kind of almost like that C, that perception that you're talking about. It makes me think of this idea of an attitude, almost like, I don't know, like Mr. Miyagi, like mind over matter. It's how we approach something. And I came across a couple articles this week in reading, and one of them is from the New York Times, and there's a study that they cite. It says that 30,000 Americans who had the highest level of stress were about 43% more likely to die, only if they also believed that stress was bad for their health. And then to contrast that, those who experienced high stress but didn't view it as harmful were less likely to die compared to any other group in the study. Including people stress. Who are very... What's that?
Even those with lower levels of stress.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
So perception is so powerful in living well through stressful experiences.
Yeah, we've acknowledged that we can't get away from it. We've acknowledged that it's kind of here to stay, right? It's part of the human experience.
Yeah.
In fact, any type of growth that we experience as humans by nature, or it is stressful, right? Getting your PhD was stressful. Getting my CFP designation, Certified Financial Planner designation, was stressful. A lot of long nights studying, but our perception, we know that it's healthy for us. So I think that as we kind of move into this idea of how do we deal with it now, we acknowledge that it's there. Like what are solutions to coping with it, I guess. And that's what I want to spend the rest of this episode talking about.
And specifically the effect of perception or attitude in dealing with stress. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So in this article, it's titled "In Stressful Times, Make Stress Work for You." Carrie Lebowitz and Aaliyah Crum, they talk about their experience working with Navy SEALs and college students and business leaders to help them, I guess, harness the benefits of stress and minimize the negative, harmful impacts of it. And the first thing that they say in dealing with stress is to acknowledge your stress, almost to name it. I think oftentimes we try to avoid the stressor, avoid the problem, ignore it. And as a result of trying to ignore it, we almost become hyper-focused on it, can't get away from it.
Yeah, and I would even say prior to that, acknowledging the stress, just acknowledge that your mind is already thinking about the stress and that you already have developed a stress mindset, and the mindset like they talk about, is either one in which you view stress as enhancing or one in which you view stress as debilitating. And, we're living through a time of very, very complex stressors and multifaceted stressors. So our mind is not unilaterally in one position or the other. We're probably, thinking debilitating thoughts about some of the stressors and enhancing thoughts about some of the other stressors, but just acknowledging that you already have a stress mindset going into all of this. And so then when we acknowledge the stress, what we're doing is we're ripping ourselves out of the mirage of denial that this isn't happening to us. We're ripping ourselves out of that and into this place of, it is happening right around me. I need to open my eyes and acknowledge it.
The first step to solving your problem is acknowledging that you have a problem.
Just like when I went to the doctor and they did blood tests and they said your cholesterol is a little bit up, I had to then acknowledge, wow, I have probably been under more stress than I was aware of.
Yeah, I had a similar story to that last year where I was just feeling, you sometimes you lie in bed and you just kind of can feel, you don't feel right? You can almost like feel your heart beating that you normally don't feel it. Like, oh my gosh, I'm 40 now and I'm starting to have all these questions about health. And, you talk about resources, right? There's the stressor. I had a good friend of mine pass away very young from heart complications. It's something that is in my family. So I'm starting to feel something and I'm starting to get stressed. You go to the doctor and they did all the fancy tests and they came back and said, oh, you're just fine. Everything's good. And they're like, why was I feeling that way? Right. So there's nothing here. I guess it could have been denying the fact that I'm feeling that way, but I'm like, there's this stressor, and if I don't deal with it, it's gonna be problematic. And then dealing with it, move on. Right. So
acknowledging it was far more effective for you in dealing with it than just continuing to lie in bed and feel it.
So like acknowledge the fact that we're living in a pandemic that hyper contagious, that people can get sick, and that there's some who are more vulnerable to it, and we're around them on a regular basis, and that's stressful because we don't want to be the cause of causing someone else pain, and that's stressful.
That's all part of it for sure, and I think another part of it is just not knowing how it's going to end up. We've had lots of prognostications over the last few months, and differing opinions, and not knowing who knows what's going on.
So
that adds to the stress.
So acknowledging it is the first step. So like the whole, get over it, just, move on from it. Like, suck it up. That's not a good, that's almost like ignoring it. That's not that's not accepting it. That's not accepting the fact that, hey, this is a problem.
Yeah. Right.
And then
that's a different kind of denial in most cases.
And interesting though, I mean, I'm no scientist by no means, but typically if we're stressed about something, there's good reason why we're stressed about it. It's not always out of the, there's always a good reason why we're stressed about it, right? We're stressed about getting sick. Why? Because health might be important to us.
Yeah.
We're stressed about our debt. Why? Because we recognize that there's something not good about being in debt. We're stressed about having enough money for retirement. Why? Because one day I won't be able to work and I need money to support myself. So typically stress is coming from some point of legitimacy, if I can say that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's an indicator that this is something, that what you're feeling is connected to a deeper value for you.
And understanding that value is super valuable, right? It's not, you don't feel crazy anymore about having this stress.
Yeah. I was listening to a report about vaccine development for COVID-19 and how this reporting was showing that a large national survey was revealing that about 50% of those surveyed would be hesitant to take a vaccine for COVID. And so that means 50% of the people surveyed are stressed about COVID vaccines. And so what value does that connect with for them? They're probably wanting to stay healthy, wanting to stay safe, wanting to maybe, I don't know what it is, but whatever that stress is they're feeling connects to a deeper value. And the value is sometimes related to the behaviors we engage in to deal with the stress and sometimes not. Mm-hmm. So after we acknowledge our stress, the next thing to do is owning our stress by connecting it to our value. What is it that we're really valuing in this situation? Is it keeping my family safe? Is it keeping myself safe? Is it keeping loved ones that I deeply care about safe? What is the value?
Yeah, because oftentimes when we connect that stress to the value, I think sometimes we find out that, wait a minute, the way I'm dealing with it is almost counterproductive to the actual value itself. Right?
Right. The behaviors that I'm engaging in to deal with the stress are often counterproductive to the value I hold.
So I'll pick something from my world. I am worried about money. I'm stressed about it. And the way I deal with stress is to go on Amazon and just buy stuff that I don't need.
Right. Spend to feel better.
Yeah. Right. I'm worried about being healthy and staying healthy. And my way of dealing with it is to overeat, which just leads to me feeling less healthy.
Right. So you're acknowledging the stress, but the value that you hold is not directly connected to the behaviors that you're engaging in to deal with the stress.
Yeah,
and are in fact counterproductive to dealing with this to dealing with the stress.
Yeah, in planning. And I always say that, what are we planning for? What's the particularly in budgeting, the goal of budgeting isn't to budget. The goal of budgeting is to help you reach a very specific goal that you value. So when you sit down and work on a budget, the goal isn't that budget, but the goal is to remind yourself, I'm doing this because I want to retire early. I want to save for a vacation, an 8-day vacation, so I can reduce my stress. It's connecting the reason that value, that core value, if you will, to dealing with that stressor. So now we've connected our stress to that reason. Then what's next?
Well, I want one other thing about that, connecting the stress to the value. In that article that you're citing, I love the sentence that they use that we should all answer, which is to try to fill in the blank. I'm stressed about blank. I'm stressed about blank because I deeply care about blank.
So let's do this. Let's play this. And a lot of people are worried about COVID right now. I'm stressed about my kid going back to school because I deeply care about
my kid's safety, my kid's health.
Or because, and sometimes I even think it's sometimes even further than that, because maybe you accept the fact that kids are more resilient. But I'm worried about my kid going back to school because I deeply care about my 75-year-old grandmother or my 75-year-old parents.
Concerned about my kid being exposed to a contagion that they bring home to a more a less resilient family member.
Yeah, but that still doesn't solve the problem. That just says why we're stressed. That just almost, to me, it almost gives us reason to it almost validates our stress to a certain degree, but it hasn't really solved the problem of stress. Or has it? The fact that we've acknowledged it and we're connecting it, that in of itself
Yeah, I mean that goes a long way. Again, kind of going back to the ABCX model, there's very little directly we can do about the stressor. So what we can do is increase our resources and change our perceptions. And so what with the exercise that we're going through is linking our stress and stress behaviors to our values. And that really helps us clarify what it is we're feeling. And if we can clarify what we feel, we're much better able to choose behaviors that are productive and adaptive rather than unproductive and maladaptive behaviors.
So that's step 3 is if we've acknowledged it, we're owning it, we're connecting it to that core value, and then we want to try to find those behaviors that will help us cope with it, that align more with that why, that core value of the very reason why we're stressing out.
That's right. I mean, we still will probably feel the need to do something, and we'll engage in behaviors to try to deal with the stressor, but now we're much more aware of why we're feeling what we're feeling and can choose behaviors that align with our values and are much more productive.
Yeah. So
like if I'm feeling physically crappy and unhealthy, grabbing a beer and some potato chips, which I love, it's probably not going to help me feel better physically. But going for a 20-minute walk, 30-minute walk might help me feel better.
Yeah, or grabbing a beer and potato chips and hanging out with a friend to help you talk through something might be.
Hanging out with a friend with whom I'm going to laugh and enjoy their company and enjoy the fellowship, that might be more productive than just doing it, chips and beer on my own.
Yeah. We've had a couple of those hangouts. I'll call you up, hey man, I need to talk to you about, I'm stressed out about something. We'll go catch a soccer game, grab a beer, and I'll say, this is what I'm stressed about. And it's great, it's great to be friends with a therapist.
Yeah, and back to the ABCX model and resources, part of our resource is our social network.
Yeah.
And so having friends that you love and enjoy that help you laugh and help you cry at the right times and help you get through difficult things, who also have professional skills that you can lean upon as needed, that's part of each of our resource network.
Yeah, and I think that's key. And this kind of goes back to this whole idea of relationships and the value of relationships is in of ourselves, like on our own, we have a very difficult time functioning and processing certain things. We get in our own way, right? Like I'm a financial advisor. I've been in this industry for a long time. I've got my certified financial planner designation, but I still need sometimes the clarity of someone who's not in my situation to kind of keep me in check from time to time.
Yeah. We need each other.
Absolutely.
And COVID has been, part of the COVID stressor is it has been isolating, particularly for certain members of the community who need to isolate more. And so we need each other. We're a resource for each other, but we can't access that resource. That compounds the stress that we're feeling in many cases.
Yeah. There's something you said a long time ago that has impacted actually the way I do financial planning. And as we're talking through this idea of learning to deal with stress, this actually reminds me of it. I mean, this is it precisely. You said that the process of counseling is as important, if not more so, than the actual counsel itself. So the process of understanding what the problem is as important as the solution itself. For me, the financial planning, having the conversations about what we're trying to accomplish in someone's financial life is more important than the actual plan itself. It's understanding why I'm not where I want to be and what I need to do to get there is as important as black and white words on a piece of paper. And it just seems like as we're dealing with stress, having this conversation, I said, well, so now we know what our stress is and we've connected it to a core value, but it's still there, right? But we're processing it, and that could lead to that solution.
Yeah, I mean, we can try this on you if you like right now. I mean, you acknowledged your stress
this
about
is dangerous.
your audio equipment.
Yeah.
And so owning the stress, I'm stressed about the audio because I deeply care about
high quality podcast audio.
And you care about high quality podcast audio because you care about what else do you deeply
care about? Every single one of you listening to this right now, that you hear this in a perfectly clear, crisp voice.
Okay. So you care about people's experience of the audio quality of the podcast.
That's right.
You really care about other people in this case.
We're getting personal here. I do. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so so then behaviorally, what are some more productive behaviors that you can engage in? I know, I've seen you get on the podcast, or before we start recording, you sometimes will.
So I think hold on, time out. I think we need some backstory here, real quick. So I've got this fancy microphone. It's a USB powered microphone, and it's got this interface that it connects to my computer. And what I'm learning is there's some power issue going on powering the mic with my laptop and docking station. I can't figure it out. And every time I think I've solved the problem, the mic will cut out. Except this show, we're actually, I think I might have solved the problem.
We're doing great.
So yeah, my stress is visibly kind of reducing. I can feel it.
That's fantastic. You could also jump on a phone call with an audio expert and see if they can troubleshoot it a little bit. It sounds like
that was a stressor in of itself. But no, actually, that's where the problem was. That's where that's why I solved the problem, or kind of in some detective work figured it out that it was a power issue. It was in a Facebook group with this particular hardware, with the Focusrite hardware folks. So it goes back to your idea of resources. It's having the resources to troubleshoot and to figure out. I know we're talking about audio and kind of flippantly talking about stress, but it's a legitimate stressor for me.
It's a stressor.
Yeah.
And so going back and kind of wrapping up with this idea about the stress mindset, I want to just mention a couple of tried and true thoughts, cognitions that people engage in that are debilitating. So stress debilitating mindset thoughts are things like, I can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
This shouldn't be happening. This is unfair.
It's too hard.
It's too hard. I can't do this. This shouldn't be happening. This is unfair. Those are kind of categorically the most common stress debilitating thoughts. So if you contrast that with a mindset that is or thoughts that are more productive and helpful, we think about things like, I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
I got this. I can make it through this. We can get through this together. We'll figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
I know someone who can help me with this. Or, what a challenge. I look forward to the challenge. I don't know if I can do it, but I'd like to try. I remember one day you sent me a workout to try to do 150 burpees and time it.
So
and when I first saw that, I thought, oh my goodness, that's stupid. I should never. You hear that language I'm using?
Yeah.
Stupid. I can't do that. That's all debilitating perception. But when I started to think about, if I break that into groups of 10 and just do 15 sets,
little smaller victories,
maybe take 20 seconds off during each set, I could work my way through that eventually.
Yeah.
And I did. I can, when I switch my mindset to, I can probably do that if I think about it the right way, I was able to do it.
Yeah. That's why I don't read the workouts the night before, because I stress all night about them.
Yeah. But attitude is so impactful for how we experience stress.
And kind of as we're coming to a close here, like really, what's the alternative? Like we've already acknowledged the fact that stressors exist. We don't create. I mean, sometimes we create our own issues, we create our own problems, but a lot of the stressors that are going on right now, they exist in the world. We can't avoid them. We have to deal with them. I mean, what's the alternative? There is no alternative other than to healthily try to deal with them, right? In the article, kind of one of the closing statements that they say is they say, trying to utilize our stress during this scary time might sound overly optimistic or even unfeasible, but consider the alternative. Failing to embrace our stress only creates more stress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're surrounded by stress right now, all the time, everywhere we go. We can't avoid it, so we have to deal with it in a more healthy way.
Yeah, and I just encourage people that kind of as they go through this and acknowledge their stress and own their stress, is lean into. There's a reason why professionals exist, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's trying to fix a leaky toilet, right, on your own when you don't have the skill set, lean into a professional to do that. Or whether it's stressing about money, lean into a professional to do that. Or stressing about stress and not trying to figure things out in relationships, lean into a professional. Professionals exist for this very reason. Those are some of those resources to help us manage that stress, that everyday stress in our life. And that's a good use of money. It's a good use of money.
Is to alleviate some of your own stress by paying a professional to tackle that problem for you.
My dad always said, pay someone to do what they went to school for, son. Don't try to do it on your own. Right? When I try to do it on my own, it never works out well.
Right. This has been great.
Yeah. So, cool. You have any closing words, Matt, before we shut this thing down, before my mic stops working?
I like what you were saying there about how stress is inevitable. You can accept that and work through it to your benefit, or you can try to avoid or deny at your detriment. So we're better off as a community to say, this is what we're living through. How are we going to deal with it in the most productive way?
Yep. So name it, own it, and then use it to grow. Invest in your relationships.
Dr. Matt Morris maintains an active private practice for couples and families in the greater New Orleans area. To learn more about his work, visit drmattmorris.com. Erik Garcia can be found online at plan-wisely.com. His branch office is located in New Orleans, Louisiana. The branch phone number is 504-218-5479. Securities offered through Royal Alliance Associates Incorporated, member FINRA, SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through New Century Financial Group, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Insurance services offered through Garcia Financial Group, LLC. Entities listed are not affiliated.